tuned into Quick Charge, the high voltage podcast bringing you the top stories in electric vehicles and sustainable energy daily. And it's all powered by Electrek. Welcome to Quick Charge. It's April 22nd, 2025, and I'm your host, Joe Boris. As we've been doing for the last several weeks, we're going to be focusing on a single topic for today's show, and that topic is EV financing. Obviously, with all the tariffs that are out there, there's a lot of uncertainty in the space, but a lot of that uncertainty comes from a lack of knowledge. And certainly when it comes to kind of financing tools, lease tools, other kinds of ways for fleets and commercial operators to acquire a new EV, there's a real gap in the industry between what's available, what's out there in terms of incentives, in terms of financial tools, even in terms of tax regulations compared to internal combustion. And these are really important, critical things to understand. Even if you're buying a vehicle for yourself, we talk about this all the time with these monthly rebate and cashback deal posts. Cynics will point at big rebates and claim they mean that the vehicle isn't selling, but that exposes them for the industry noobs that they are, and I stand by that statement. A rebate is a powerful financial tool that helps automakers and dealers overcome obstacles like negative equity, poor credit, and down payment requirements and get you to drive home in that vehicle that you want today and not have to wait 1 year, 2 years down the road when you're in a better equity position. And there's plenty of reasons for that and plenty of vehicles that have huge rebates and incentives on them to help them move vehicles. This is the example that I've been touting for the last couple of weeks. Costco executive members get a massive $31,500 off Chevy BrightDrop van with 272 miles of range and more room inside its walls than your first apartment. GM Chevy BrightDrop electric van is one of the best commercial EVs you can buy. And if you're a Costco executive member, you can get one for yourself or your business with more than $31,500 off. This is an actual vehicle that's for sale in Washington State. You can look up the VIN. You can check out what dealership it's at. $84,235 MSRP, $25,500 manufacturer to customer rebate, $3,000 Costco member savings, and then some additional discounts as well, brings you to $52,985. And that is, of course, before additional incentives. But wait, says the floating disembodied ghost of the great Billy Mays, there's more in addition to that $31,500 of discounts Costco executive members get. There are deals to be had on chargers and a number of other state and local utility incentives your business might qualify for, bringing the cost of adding a new Chevy BrightDrop to your fleet even lower. In Northern Illinois, for example, ComEd commercial customers can get $7,500 additional dollars in rebates for a new BrightDrop Zevo van. That's in addition to everything being shown there. Is a $39,000 price cut enough to get you to take a look at a new BrightDrop? At $45,000 from a starting price of $84,235, can you afford not to? Now, there's going to be questions about how these kind of incentives impact residual values, impact resale values. But as you're going to see when we get to my guest today, those things might actually work out in your favor. And that's especially true if you're buying a hot commodity like a $79,000 Rivian van, or if you're an electrician, if you're a plumber, and you need to upfit that vehicle. Rivian Upfit program offers fleet managers custom solutions for its EVs. They're going to help you get that commercial vehicle, get that EV into your business, whatever that is. If you're an EMT, you're an ambulance, you're a delivery driver, and help you set up that vehicle in order to operate. The general consensus, of course, around Electrek is that the direct-to-consumer model that Rivian is offering, and even Tesla and CarMax to a lesser degree, delivers a superior customer experience. I don't buy that. I've always been on the dealer franchise model, and I think that that is the better way to go because the competitiveness that has led to develop talented fleet managers at those franchise dealers, it goes into putting in the effort to get to know the needs of the local businesses and the buyers in their area and understand what upfit options make sense and crucially what to stock for quick turnaround when their customers need it. You might always be able to predict when you want to buy a new EV or buy a new vehicle or replacement van or truck, but you never know when someone's going to run a red light, when a tree is going to fall on you, especially if you're in a disaster response or other emergency scenario. You might need to get a new vehicle quickly. And if you don't have a good relationship with your dealer, they don't understand that, they don't have what you need in stock, that's going to slow down your operation. Now, Rivian is hoping that its upfit partners will do most of the heavy lifting and relationship building for them. But my 2 cents is that if building cars is hard, building relationships is harder. And Rivian isn't going to make a good first impression by talking down to its customers. And yeah, there's more to it than that. They actually have a whole page about what is upfitting. So it's a little bit sketchy. But your car dealer is not going to know this. You walk into a dealership, your salesman's not going to understand all the EV financing tools. That's why we turn to the experts. These are my good friends at Accelerate Auto. I've worked with Brent Seavey since way, way back in the Nissan days, 2009, 2010 era. He was one of the first employees ever at Tesla, and certainly the first in the used car program. I remember his first photograph from his first day at the office. There was two vehicles, a Tesla Roadster and a Model S by his desk, a phone, and that was it. So he's definitely an expert. He's been around these things since day one. And Accelerate Auto has been one of the only companies that Tesla continues to work with and refer repair, warranty, maintenance business to, and now commercial leases. That brings us to our guest today, Guy O'Brien. He's the vice president of vehicle financing at Accelerate Auto. He is the guy to go to when you're trying to add 10 or 15 or 1,500 vehicles to your fleet. He's going to walk you through that entire process, whether you're a police department, whether you're a delivery fleet, whether you're a rental operation. Guy is your guy. And man, so sorry about that one. It's like the end of Police Squad where they all just like hold for like 2 minutes. All right. Well, there's the least smooth intro to one of these that we've ever done. My guest here today, Guy O'Brien, VP Finance and Director of Fleet at XCare. Guy, thank you so much for being on the show. I know you are a wealth of knowledge. And, like I said, when we first set this up, right, we're a week away from the ACT Expo. We have so many fleet buyers right now who just wrapped up their quarterly taxes, their taxes from last year. They want to electrify their fleets. And with all the uncertainty that's out there, whether it's uncertainty with tariffs, whether it's uncertainty with financing, whether it's simply an unfamiliarity with some of the financial tools that are out there that can help them electrify without tying up too much of their cash flow, I think you're the guy to take us through all of that. Let's talk a little bit about, some of the product centric things that are out there, some of the different tools that are available to fleet buyers. Give us the spiel.
The time has never been better. Truly, it's the best time it's ever been. It's prime for fleet managers that want to make that switch to EV. There is a softened market. The demand has been a little bit less than anticipated, so the manufacturers have manufactured a little more product and supply than what anticipated, and that's just blanket. That's not an EV statement. That's just market statement as it relates to just what's happening in the macro, as well as in the car industry. And so as a result, inventory's flush, and the opportunity is there to make that transition. But when you think about the transition for the EV, a lot of the trepidation, the pause, has been either A, unaware or unable to. So Prime, for example, had complete exclusivity to the Rivian 500 and the 700. We all see those vans pulling up. They have been wildly successful. Obviously, Jeff Bezos is all about profit, so he's not going to do anything other than not just going green. Although that's a huge initiative. It's about going lean. It's a function of increasing cash flow through certainly the tax benefits, which we'll talk about, but also from a TCO standpoint. Why do these vehicles make sense? What you effectively have in TCO costs, downtime. And if it's something as simple as productivity. So you're imagining a fleet, the first thing that probably happens of ICE vehicles is you're getting in the vehicle and you're gassing up in the morning. You're getting a cup of coffee at the local gas station. There's lost time in productivity. Well, with an EDV, these vehicles are ready to go from launch. And so there's just a waterfall of benefits, but there are certainly some straightforward components there that they didn't have optionality. And with Walmart and FedEx, with the GM BrightDrop, both of these largest entities in the world have proved a case study and paid the early adopter tax. I mean,
well, let's talk about that because there's a difference there between those two vehicles, right? Like when you look at the Amazon van, That's a class two van. That's for people who aren't familiar with class two, class three. That's a GVWR of less than 10,000 pounds
Yep.
in most states, right?
Yep.
Because we're not really a country. We're 50 independent countries in a trench coat pretending to
That's
be
it.
big and
That's
bad,
true.
right? So all the laws in Illinois where I am and where, our mutual friend Brent CV is over at XCare, 10,500 pounds is the class three GVWR. In some states, that bigger Chevy Bright Drop van, that 600 model, qualifies as a class three, and that puts it in a different category, not
Does.
only for taxes, but also for incentives. Like here in the state of Illinois, we have a ComEd commercial vehicle incentive. It's $5,000 for class two, it's $30,000 for a class three, which puts that larger Bright Drop van into cost contention with stuff like the Ford Transit and the Ram ProMaster. What are some of the benefits to companies who want to lease that bigger van, even though they might see that initial MSRP being higher? What are some of the tools that are out there to help them bring that under control and maybe overcome the obstacles to adoption that they might perceive as real?
No doubt. So there is the Section 45W, which is a federal tax credit. And so that is contingent upon weight, to your point. And the Rivian 500, that's set up for ordering, pre-ordering. We can do that right now. The 500, the smaller effective van. The weight on that GDWR is effectively 9,500 pounds, right? But the Bright Drop Zevo 600 is over 14,000 pounds. So what does that mean? The tax credit that you can take across the board federally that's still in play, 7,500, certainly applies to the Rivian. A little bit of advantage due to weight on the Bright Drop. Since it's over 14,000 pounds, you can claim up to 40 grand of a tax
Oh,
credit
wow.
due to the weight, right? So you're talking about a $90,000 effective round numbers, $80,000 vehicle where you can apply for a 40,000, and it doesn't stop there, because when you're talking about, what's my best financing solution as a commercial business in my fleet, whether it's in a traditional commercial executive fleet for Tesla Model S's, or you're in the EDV space where you have a Service Pro use case, you have the ability to do either a track lease or an equipment finance agreement, EFA. And they both have, it's all really contingent upon what your business needs are and how you want to play one of those cards. It's really simple. The track lease is writing off the expenses of the payments and the deficiency balance as an expense for your business. So if you're a small proprietor, and again, you're a realtor and you're driving your Tesla Model 3, or you're a fleet of vehicles where you have 10 or 100 EDVs in your fleet, and you want to make that transition, both apply. What works for one works for 100. And so as a result, you have the ability to take a look at a track lease where you can expense the payments, and you can expense at the end of the lease if there's a deficiency balance, which effectively means what your payoff is versus what your residual. As a vehicle, as a financial vehicle, as a thriving business, you're looking for tax write-offs. You are every year, right? You're looking for tax write-offs. And so the benefit of a track lease is you can write off the lease payments as an expense. If there is a deficiency balance, you could write off that as a lease payment as an expense, which could be a benefit to, it's either you're going to give it to the government or you're going to apply for it. But a lot of businesses, sole proprietors, there's a lot of businesses that are personally leasing their vehicle, they're personally financing their vehicle, and they don't have any ability to take advantage of not just the tax credit, because that's straightforward, the 7,500 on the vehicle, but writing the payments off as an expense. And so effectively you're using the vehicle as a financial vehicle.
Right. You're using the vehicle as the vehicle to manage your cash flow and reduce your taxes and your tax burden. Let
100%.
me ask you a question, right? Because leasing is something that is generally misunderstood, and like
100%.
things, like all things that are misunderstood, right? Like we're frightened monkeys clinging to a mossy rock hurtling through space. We fear the unknown, right? Most people hear the word lease and they shut down. They think I drive too many miles. They think, oh, well, what happens at the end of it? I'm giving my money for nothing. Number one, a lot of these leases are set up, to your point, as financial vehicles to help companies and help business owners eventually own that vehicle asset. The flip side of that is, when you're looking at a car that you want to buy for yourself, you're going to buy a used car for your kid to take to college and then sell it when they're at the end of that. You're looking for that high resale value, that high residual value. But in some cases, having an increased depreciation, having more depreciation can be beneficial to the way we use a business. So when you see
Yeah.
a $90,000 bright drop being advertised with a $40,000 tax credit with another, $15,000 local rebate, that's going to bring down that resale value. How can you use that to your advantage to electrify more quickly and bring on more vehicles into an expanding fleet?
Great question. And to your point about nuances or misnomers or phantom thoughts, a lot
I
of
like
the,
phantom thoughts. We're going to
you
go with
know,
that.
a lot of the belief structure or knowledge of leases is really through a manufacturing personal lease, even Tesla's personal lease. So one of the key differences in a commercial lease versus a personal lease is on a personal lease, you have you're thinking about low payment. It's really thought of as a rental model, but there, as a business owner, you have to change not just your thinking, but you have to understand how it works. It's not the same as a personal lease. So what you're describing is I'm making lease payments and I'm worried about mileage overages. On a personal side, it's a real thing, right? If you agree to a 10,000 mile a year lease and over 3 years you got 30,000 miles, but you didn't really think about the trips you're going to go see grandma, the business trips that you were going to make, or you had a successful year and you were commuting more as a result. You're going to have some on a personal lease. You're going to have mileage overages on a per mile basis based on your contract. On a commercial lease, there is no mileage overages. You're using that vehicle for business use. Over 50% has to be, but you're using that vehicle for business use. Now, with that, there's no mileage overages. You don't have to worry about that. Run your business, work. But you are looking at, if I am driving it 22,000, 25,000 miles a year, I mean, you're affecting resale value, obviously, right? You're
Yeah.
putting more mileage on the car, and as a result, it's worth less. It's just logic. In the resale value, to answer your question, on the commercial side, again, the mindset has to be, I need a vehicle, but I really need a tool, a financial tool to decrease my income tax burden. And you're in that scenario, you can use your vehicle as that in a lease, in a track lease, as a tool in your payments. And if there is a decrease in what that vehicle is worth based upon what you drove, based upon the vehicle condition, there's variable factors, and the payoff of that vehicle, if there is a deficiency balance that you have to eat up, that deficiency balance, and this is widely unknown, even those that have experiences with commercial leases, they forget that that's actually, depending upon your financial situation, your company growth mode, fantastic news.
Yeah, let's talk about that because that incentive stacking or incentive layering, I think, was the hot buzzword that people were
Yeah.
using a couple of years ago. That's crucial. And one of the things that up until very recently, to your point about inventory being now having caught up a little bit with demand, or in some cases we have oversupply of inventory, one of the key issues has always been some of these rebates and incentives don't kick in until after the vehicle is received. So you have to effectively pay out for the vehicle, take delivery, and then use it. I'm starting to see some dealers, I'm starting to see some programs being written in such a way that you can apply some rebates to the vehicle at the point of purchase at the PO level and effectively apply those at the dealership. Now, you're not a dealership, right?
Correct.
I don't think I can go into my local dealer and start talking about Section 45W and track leasing. They don't have the expertise, right?
Correct.
They may not even know what incentives are available to stack, let alone that you can stack them, right? That's not training that dealers have. So if I'm listening to this, I'm listening to this podcast and I'm sitting here going, man, this is really technical, but it's really interesting. I have a small fleet. I want to lease a vehicle for my business. Where do they go find this knowledge? And like, I understand with all due respect, I understand that you're going to say, well, I'm Guy O'Brien. I'm the VP of finance at Accelerate Auto. They're going to call me. Right. And that's why you're here. And they're going to do that. But some people have relationships with their accountants. Some people have relationship with their, with their business attorney. Do those assets, do those resources have this kind of information? Or is it really this specialized that like that people need to go to you or someone very much like you?
Certainly, great question. Validate all this through your accountant or CPA or CFO. But the knowledge of it, if you're not thinking about it every day, you don't know, because most things in life are broad brushed, right? It's leasing and whatever they saw on a commercial through or know through just their own Google research. From as a business owner, they don't understand. Now, as a business owner of a fleet, they probably understand Section 179 because that applies to ICE the same from an equipment finance standpoint, that you can apply for Section 179 up to 1.2 million of your fleet for a tax rebate. But they don't understand the other components of just being knowledgeable, just exposure of Section 45W, bonus depreciation on the EFA, or thinking about very simply, and not to make it complex because it's really not, that through a commercial lease, Tesla doesn't do them. We do them, and Tesla refers those commercial leases to us. That as a business owner, you're really, not aware that you can take your payments and write them off as an expense. And so it's tribal knowledge. The best probably word for it is boutique knowledge. It's not something that people typically know how to use it. And that's the exciting part for us as a team.
That's really cool. And I think, we talk a little bit about downtime. We talk a little bit about maintenance. One of the things that people don't often talk about or think about is that because of technology like regenerative braking, you're doing far fewer maintenance cycles on brake pads and brake rotors, shocks and things like that, because it's less moving back and forth because you typically have a better weight distribution. There's a lot of factors within the EV architecture that give you benefits from ICE or internal combustion, right? I think another one of these is, we talk about risk mitigation. There are products out there, from your own team. There's the XCare wrap warranty that includes battery replacement in there. And that's something that becomes important, especially your first time out in an EV. You want to mitigate that uncertainty. But there's also the uncertainty from fuel prices. If you're we've seen before in times of political turmoil and uncertainty, we've seen gas prices go up to $6, $7 a gallon in Canada and Europe. They've seen $8 and $9 a gallon. So we don't know. Whatever budget projecting we're doing now, going forward with an EV fleet, we're insulating from that risk of volatility in fuel prices. Because if you look at the energy costs out there, if you look at the price of a kilowatt hour, even not adjusted for inflation over the last 30 years, it's within a couple of pennies. It doesn't move too much. So if you're looking at this 4 or 5 years out, you're looking at a long-term asset for your fleet. There's a lot of benefit in predictability going with an EV that you don't get from ICE. And if you can manage this cash flow thing and you can eliminate that, I think you've got a winner. But I think the other key thing is people need to find out about you, right? So how are you doing in addition to this show, in addition to other shows like this? What kind of outreach are you doing? How can people find out more about you? What's the website? What's the social media? Are you dancing on tables for the TikTok guys? What are you doing?
We are participating in all the major conferences and shows to spread the word about what we do. And we are going to be launching some pretty rich content, fun content, kind of unplugging the misnomers. It's still early. The overall global adoption, national adoption of EV. I mean, even though, EV's been around for 15 years, 20 years, people don't know what the optionality is. And as you can see, every manufacturer, you think of Audi, they've switched almost their entire fleet dedicated to EV, right? And stopped legacy models that is really they hung their hat on. Why are they doing that for the future? And to your point about gas costs and insulating yourself, the right way to think about it is future proof, right? Is just really, with the unknown reality of all the uncertainty, certainly in Q1 of business year, this has been a volatile Q1, probably going to continue out throughout the year, just in terms of transition of administration, transition of just uncertainty, and the backdrop of what the tariff impact is, positive or negatively, going to have in the marketplace. If you can almost fix your fuel cost as it relates to the variable, that and future proof that you don't have that exposure or liability, you don't have to ride the wave of the market, you can start having consistency. Forecasting cash flow in your business becomes extremely not just in TCO, but also in terms of just your overall out. That you nailed it on the head, where some people think that the initial cash flow out is been the reason why we haven't jumped into EV. And here's a very cool, rad statement that we can finance. When you talked about down payment earlier, typically your down payment is first payment and a small acquisition fee to get started. So you don't have that from an initial out cash flow. You don't have this massive, to your point, 10 grand down. You have an initial.
You don't have a 10% or 15%
You don't have
down.
a 10, 15, 20% down. You're looking at first payment per vehicle. You're looking at an acquisition fee per vehicle, which, depending on what you're getting into, a couple grand, 2-3 grand. I didn't finish my thought. Forgive me. We can finance up to 125% of cost, or MSRP, at the initial onset with upfitting. So if you're looking at an EDV and you need to wrap your vehicle, I mean, what's better for your brand when you pulled up as a service pro, depending upon what you're doing, with a massive wrap, with a massive billboard? That's why everyone knows.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second, because I
Yeah.
think a lot of commercial buyers understand this, but a lot of retail buyers don't understand the key reason that manufacturer rebates and artificially high MSRPs exist. People will often say, well, why would you have a $40,000 vehicle or a $50,000 vehicle and then put a $7,500 customer bonus cash offer on it? And you nailed it right on the head, that a lot of the ways that these financing companies work is based on a percentage of MSRP. So if you have a $50,000 vehicle and you can finance up to $60,000, you can go up to 20% over MSRP. You can finance up to 60. That gives the buyer, the commercial fleet buyer, 10 grand to effectively upfit the vehicle. If the manufacturer offers not a discount, not a reduction of MSRP, but a cashback or a rebate of another $5,000, that money can then go into upfitting or into, overcoming negative equity in the previous vehicle trade-in, or overcoming some of that initial down payment objection that some customers may have. So it's really interesting that you say this in a conversation about leasing, because we're starting to see from other manufacturers. You got Kia that has $11,000 in lease bonus cash. You've got Polestar, you've got Volkswagen. They all have massive amounts of lease bonus cash in there. And how that can be used from a fleet perspective and how that can be used as a financial tool, I think is critically important to help fleets understand that. So I'm really grateful that you brought that up. Guy, this is awesome. We're getting to the end of our time commitment here. Obviously, Accelerate Auto. That's XCELERATE auto.com. Definitely check out Guy if you are a small business or even a large business trying to figure out how to structure this in there. Definitely give him a call. Guy, any parting thoughts for us before we go?
Best time. This is the time to make the transition, truly, from everything you just
I
said.
thought you were saying you had the best time on the show.
I didn't have a best time, but Joe, it's always
sales pitch. Terrible way to close.
No, I get excited about what the mission here and the vision is, and how we can support companies and their transition. But no, man, Joe, really appreciate the time today, man. You run a great show.
I'm going to put a link to Accelerate Auto in the show notes. I'll also have a link to Guy O'Brien's LinkedIn here, so you can reach out to him directly with questions about some of this stuff. And as always, when we talk about money and taxes, verify. In God we trust. Everyone else we monitor. So
that's it.
Yeah. That's my disclaimer for once again, Guy O'Brien, Accelerate Auto. Be sure to check those guys out. We'll have a link to them in the show notes. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next hard-hitting, electrifying topic of conversation here. We will be at the ACT Expo next week, so it's going to be a few days probably before you get your next hit of Quick Charge. But as long as you're subscribed, you won't miss it.